All right, welcome. I'm Eric Mortimer. Welcome to the High Performance Living and Business Show, where we discuss all things high performance. Um, Today, I'm going to be joined by Sig Taylor, who is a marriage and family therapist with over 30 years experience, and he's counseled over 20,000, or he's done over 20,000 couples sessions, and he's also been married for 12 years. So he's not just talking about things from a place of theory. High performance means succeeding above standard norms over the long term without sacrificing relationships. So that's why I wanted to start off and kick off our high performance living show with some time with Sig and making sure that relationships are strong moving forward. Sig, a lot of um, our viewers are entrepreneurs. We've got real estate agents. Um, some people are in business together with their spouse. So there's a lot of things going on. And so relationships are a very important part of our audience's life. And it seems we've always got something going on, some sort of stress for relationships. I was just thinking we had Stampede canceled this year, and I've heard the stats that during Stampede, there's all kinds of things that happen and relationships break up because of affairs, and we're not having Christmas parties. So we're not having Christmas parties. There's lots of
Yeah,
other stuff
yeah,
going on to cause stress in the world
yeah.
right now. What are you seeing?
Well, I think COVID has obviously changed the whole dynamic of many people's or most people's lives. And what I always say is, and what I'm seeing is that when you're in isolation, like we all are, the relationship dynamics that already existed prior to COVID tend to be amplified.
Right,
In other words, if you're already very conflicted, you might get more conflicted.
right,
If you're distant with each other and you don't talk about things, you become maybe even more distant, more disconnected.
right,
So it tends to well, exacerbate what's already going on. Yeah.
right, right.
Mhm.
So people are more on top of each other, so there's no avoiding the issues.
Yes, and that's why I think my counseling practice over the summer tends to be a little quieter, although it hasn't been like that since COVID. But when people get out of the house, they get away from each other, they get outside, they tend to be less conflicted.
Right,
So yeah, it presents a unique problem on the one hand. Of course, it's also an opportunity as well to
sure.
connect and to actually do some relational work.
Right, and some personal growth for sure.
Yeah.
So I do want to focus the majority of our time on conflict because I think it's something that isn't discussed a lot. But before we go into that, um, with the time and the space, is there anything proactive to try and limit or reduce or diffuse that situation that we can do before it gets to that phase?
Well, the people ask me why do people get divorced, why do people have a lot of relationship problems, an answer that I give to that is it may seem a bit um, counterintuitive, but a lot of relationship problems have to do with neglect.
Okay.
That because I call it the paradox of commitment. When we were in a committed relationship, we usually know our partner's going to be there, that we can depend on them. It's easy to make them a low priority. It's almost like it's not intentional, but we prioritize work, we prioritize kids and family activities, community, devices, and often the relationship gets what's left over,
Right.
which is not a whole lot. In other words, a client said to me recently, it's our partner is an easy give. In other words, we can give, we can let that one go because this is more urgent over here. So it has to do with we don't look after our relationships very well, most of us.
Right.
Yeah, once we're through that kind of honeymoon, early stages of relationships, we tend to it's easy to take each other for granted. Yeah.
Right. I'm just thinking of little kids, parents always say, oh, they're so much better behaved at your place, and because they're safer with their parents, so they can act up. It's always like that. And with the relationships, we can act up with a relationship because we think we're safe there.
Yeah, yeah. We give, in other words, we give our best selves to other people, our work, the community, and that kind of thing.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. In other words, today marriages are lost, I call it, to kids, work, devices, volunteering, all those kinds of things. Yeah.
Okay. So before we get to the broken part or the conflict part, is there anything to sort of restabilize that, or somebody's recognizing themselves in this conversation? What kind of proactive things can they do to get back?
Well, first of all, I like to use this metaphor of the relationship marble jar. I got the marbles idea from Renee Brown, famous teacher.
Yeah.
That every time you do something kind, every time you have your partner's back, you're they get a sense that they can trust you. You put a marble in the marble jar,
Okay.
right? And every time you have a conflict, every time you say something nasty or you're mean or whatever, you dump marbles out of the marble jar.
Okay.
And there's something called the negativity bias,
Mm-hmm.
where it takes 20 positives to make up for one negative. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a nasty interaction, you've just dumped 20 marbles out of your marble jar.
Right.
And so that means you've got to do 20 things, 20 more marbles have to go back in there to replace that. Because what I'm talking about is this concept called positive or negative sentiment override. It comes from years of studying relationships. There's this unseen dynamic in relationships that is based on trust. And the more marbles you have in the trust relationship marble jar, the more resilient you are as a couple. It's like think of it like a bank account. When
Mm-hmm.
you're in your overdraft in the
Sure.
red and you get an unexpected bill, it's
Mm-hmm.
very stressful. But if
Mm-hmm.
you've got lots of reserves in your bank account, it's not as stressful. So what couples need to do is to pay attention to filling that marble jar all the time.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's your day-to-day interactions with each other. It's not one big dramatic event. It's kind things like thank yous and appreciations, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
a touch on the shoulder. It's all those little things that aren't so little make that marble jar fill up. And the
Right.
fuller it is, the more resilient you are, and the less likely you are to have conflict. And if you do have conflict, the less likely you are to have it be really nasty conflict.
Right.
Yeah.
So make enough deposits so when it comes time to make a withdrawal from the ABM, there's actually something in there.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, that's an old concept. The
Mm-hmm.
love bank
Sure.
account, the emotional bank
Sure.
account, but I like to use the trust marble jar because trust
Yeah.
is the most important part of relationships.
So each couple has a jar of marbles then, or each individual.
Well, if there's a relationship, just think of it like the marble jar sits on a
There's only
table.
only one jar for the
One jar,
relationship.
there it is,
Okay.
and that's the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just about me. It's not just about you.
Right.
It's about nurturing that third entity, if you will.
Right.
How
Okay.
clean, how healthy is our connection, our relationship?
Okay.
So you have to think of it like that.
So
Because when
that's
we go
good
from
too, it
being
being one, because you're not keeping score if I have more marbles than you.
exactly, yes, it's the maturity level required to go from being single to being a partner, to being a couple.
Right.
It goes from being like an I to a we, and the
Right.
we is represented by the marble jar. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And actually, going on with the same metaphor about the deposits and having something to draw on, I think during this time it's probably more important than ever to have that alone time, especially if you're an introvert, and do the recharging, to do the meditation, so that when you're coming into the relationship, there's more energy to give as well. Is it?
Yeah, people have different needs for that,
Mm-hmm.
for time away, alone time. I think there's, like you said, introverts tend to need more alone time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, those are ways that couples need to, well, understand each other, which really leads me to this whole topic of conflict, Eric. Um, you see, human beings have two fundamental basic drives. From an evolutionary standpoint. One drive is to connect.
Right.
It's our nature. We're meant to be connected. We're meant to trust each other. We're meant to have each other's back. It's the way we've survived on the planet, in close tribes, close connections. So it's built into our DNA, if you will, this deep sense of connection. We don't like being alone, human beings. We're social creatures. So it's natural that we seek connection. That's
Mhm.
one drive. Think of it like two fists. There's this drive of connection. Then we also, along with that drive, we have another drive, which is to be an individual. Individuation. Everybody's different. We all have different perspectives, different values. So there's this drive to connect, and there's also this drive to be an individual person and have our own point of view, our own values, our own priorities. And there's always a rub with those two drives.
Right.
They always bump into each other. And that's why conflict in that sense is inevitable.
Yeah.
I say to couples, if you're not having the odd dust up, you're probably not telling each other the truth. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so many people that think, oh, you should never fight, and then there's other people that are on top of each other all the time. So yeah, let's
Yeah.
get let's
Yeah.
get
So
into that. Like, how much is normal, how much is not, and then we can get into, if when it's inevitable, some do's and don'ts and how to's.
well, first of all, um, there's always this rub, as I said.
Yeah.
So a conflict can either become just an endless sort of nightmare in a relationship,
Yeah.
or it can be useful in terms of understanding what you're not getting that you want to get in
Right.
your relationship. So when you have a conflict, you can you can unpack it, if you will,
Hmm.
and use the conflict to actually strengthen your bond.
Right.
But you have to do it in a very specific way. Um, and what that looks like is, I teach this 4-step process. It's called the repair process with couples, where
Okay.
you take what happened and you then talk about what that meant to you, to the partner, each partner. Like, in other words, what is the story that you told yourself about what happened?
Right.
Let's just say, you said you were going to be home at 7 o'clock and you didn't come home till 8 o'clock and you didn't call. Something like that. It's
Yeah.
conflict like that.
Yeah.
Just something simple. What that one person would probably make up is, well, the person that was late doesn't care about me. I don't matter to them. I'm not important. They're selfish. That we make up a story when something happens.
Right.
So, and then when the story that we make up about it, what I just explained, then lands in our body as a feeling, as an emotion. In other words, how we think is how we feel. Like, if you think your partner's selfish and you think they don't care about you and you think you don't matter and you're not important, how is that going to make you feel to think that way?
Yep.
Not very good, right?
Hmm.
It's going to make you feel angry, sad, depressed,
Yep.
whatever it might be.
The whole gamut.
So,
Depends if it's happening over and over again too.
well, you see, so this is what happens in relationships. There's these rubs, these conflict moments that usually don't get unpacked like that. They don't usually get analyzed, because the next step to that is, once you understand how that made me feel and how the story that I made up in my head about it, you can then ask your partner, what do you want them to do different? You can move, in other words, from complaint to request. You see.
Yep.
So this four-step process leads from the event that happened, the conflict that happened, what the story is you made up about it, how that made you feel to think that way. And notice I put it, how that makes you feel to think that way, how I make myself feel,
Yeah. Taking
not how you
responsibility.
make me feel.
Yeah.
So it's taking responsibility for your own feelings. And then
Mhm.
from there, what it is I want you to do different. You could say to your partner, would you please call if you're going to be late or whatever it is. You come up with some agreement. In other words, you come up with some solution to it.
Right.
So you use the conflict to actually forward your relationship. And of course, you also get a chance to challenge your thinking, as in, is it really true that your partner is selfish? Is it really true that your partner doesn't care about you, doesn't appreciate you? You see, yeah, you challenge those automatic thoughts and beliefs.
Mhm.
And that's just a very quick and dirty way to
Yeah.
take conflict and turn it into something positive.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have couples actually doing this
Mhm.
together and planning it out when it's going to be coming up.
Well, I teach couples a repair process
Yeah.
because, as I said, most couples don't have a repair process.
Yeah.
They just have a conflict
Right.
and, a dust up,
Sure.
and then they escalate,
Yeah.
and then they basically usually withdraw, or
Right.
one of them pursues and the other one withdraws. But ultimately, the dust settles
Hmm.
and they kind of come back to normal, quote unquote, but
Right.
they don't really ever resolve it.
Yeah.
They don't get at the underlying dynamic that caused the conflict in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You ever
Be-
have them do that work on their own? Like it sounds a lot like Byron Katie's work as well too, doing the work and
yeah,
doing
yeah,
the story.
it's yeah, yeah, this is the repair process.
Hmm.
And it is a lot like Byron's Katie's work, questioning your story that you tell yourself in your head. That's true.
With
but
an
but
action
by
step. Yeah.
Eric, by far the most important thing is triggering,
Yeah.
right? See, what I tell couples right off the bat is there's the surface things that trigger us, like couples fight about kids, they fight about money, they fight about sex,
Hmm.
they fight about time, they fight about in-laws,
Hmm.
they fight about how you load the dishwasher.
Yeah.
Those are triggers
Yeah.
that trigger this underlying emotional dynamic, which is the name of the game. In other words, they bring out your worst self.
Yeah. We're never upset for the reason we think we are.
Yes, yes. So when we get triggered, we become this younger, more immature part of ourself.
Right.
Like for me, for example, my dad was an RCMP officer. I grew up in a very military family.
Hmm.
When I get triggered, I become my father,
Right.
which is this kind of pompous, arrogant, puffed up, grandiose, know-it-all guy, right? That I
Right.
think I'm better than everybody else. It's called grandiosity.
Right.
That's who I become if I don't get a handle on that part of myself.
Hmm.
And of course, my wife really loves that. She loves this pompous, arrogant bully, right? Makes her want to have sex with me right away.
Sure. Yeah.
So I've had to work that out of that's my personal work that I
Mhm.
work on all the time, is to
Yeah.
is to start to is to manage that triggering part of myself,
Right.
because it's that reactivity that is the hardest thing to deal with in couples. And that's why
Mm.
so much couples counseling is not really effective. If it doesn't get at that underlying deeper dynamic, it
Right.
doesn't really make much difference.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you see, I get puffed up and pompous. My wife gets puffed up and pompous and grandiose, and we escalate, right?
Yeah. And then
And
create.
everything goes to hell in a handbasket. Your nice day goes sideways.
Hmm.
We all been there, right?
Yeah. We,
That's the thing that has to change in relationships, and that's what requires work and ongoing maintenance to manage those patterns. Yes.
when emotions are high, intelligence is low, and it's too late. So it's a pro. So it's your suggestion is to have the proactive approach so that you're set for when it does happen or it happens less. Or
Well,
Or
you've
it's not
got
as
you
heated when it happens.
well, there's a lot of balls in the air with relationships. Yes, the more marbles you have in the jar, the more trust you have, the safer we feel in relationships. So that
Right.
reduces conflict. But you really need to learn how to step out of that pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to step out of that dance. The more arrogant I get, the more arrogant my wife gets, and the more, and it goes the more, and we escalate. You see, you have to step out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's easier said than done.
Yeah. And both have to be in for it as well.
Yes, because you see, what we're looking for in relationships is being, as much as we can, functional adults. Like you and I right now are, I think we're both in functional adult mode. you know, we can think, we can listen, we can problem solve, we can be creative, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're functional, but when I get triggered, all of a sudden that functional adult part of me goes
Yeah.
out the window.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally am taken over by this other younger part of myself.
Yeah.
And I can't think straight. I can't hear properly.
Yeah.
So you just get an idea of how challenging it is
Yeah.
to get under to get in underneath this and to really
Mm-hmm.
change this, because all this stuff comes out of our family backgrounds.
Yeah. And so
We
by the time
children
by the
live
time we're
what they
7, I guess we're formed, right? Or
well, it's we watch our parents. We watch what happens in our families. If your dad was angry, you're probably going to be angry. If you're
right.
somebody gave the silent treatment, you're probably going to do some silent treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are boundaryless and they spew, other people are walled off and they shut down and
Mm-hmm.
withdraw.
Right.
It's these emotional patterns that we learn to protect ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's what this dance is all about, is protection.
Right.
How do I avoid being hurt?
Yeah.
So we have these patterns and these ways of behaving that are designed to keep us safe.
Right.
Yeah.
Avoiding pain is more important than getting pleasure a lot of the time.
Well, we're not used to, particularly men, we're not used to being emotionally vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Most men don't like it. They're not comfortable with it. It's an area that they avoid, men more so than women,
Yeah.
generally speaking. Yeah,
And it's being required more and more though as
absolutely.
Mhm.
Well, two-thirds of divorces are initiated by women today.
Yeah.
Two-thirds. Yeah. Because women are far less happy in marriages generally than men are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the main reason the men are not happy in their marriages is because their wives are not happy.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's the shame that comes up with that too, and everything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
for them it's fear. For the women, I guess it's fear, and for the men, it's shame is the bigger things.
Well, it's not that simple. I think it's women are just have way more permission to be relational.
Mm-hmm.
Little girls have permission to have tears, to be sad, to be
Yeah.
scared, to have their feelings, if you will, to be emotionally open. Little boys are taught right away to be boys,
Mm-hmm.
which is to be out there on the playing field with other boys that are beating each other up and roughhousing on the soccer field.
Yeah.
They get the message right away that to be a man, to be a boy, is to be tough
Mm-hmm.
and to be strong and invulnerable. They get
Yeah.
that message even today, 2020. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why a lot of my work has been with men's group and stuff, and women will often say to me, "How come you do so much work with for men and not for women?" As well, I'm actually doing this for women because
Yeah.
the men are
Yeah.
the ones that are messing up the majority of the time in the relationship. So it is for them.
Yeah. Well, not always, but
No,
certainly males generally are more challenged,
yeah,
yeah, than women are when it comes to emotional vulnerability.
sure.
Right. Yeah.
So when are there any signs or pointers when it's or enough is enough? It's probably not going to work. Like there's some markers that, okay, we're having the same thing over and over again. It's been 10 years now, or like what are deal breakers for relationships?
Well, there's what I call soft reasons for divorce and hard reasons for divorce. Soft reasons for divorce are things like, we fell out of love. I love you, but I'm not in love with you anymore. We're just not compatible. We don't see things the same way. We have different values. That kind of thing.
Mhm.
That's what I call soft reasons for divorce. And by that I mean those reasons are not really the real deal, because all of those things can be worked on, can be made way better. Um, the hard reasons for divorce are things like addictions, violence, uh, untreated, undiagnosed psychiatric issues. Those are hard reasons. Infidelity. But the vast majority of couples can turn their marriages around if they do the work, you see.
Right.
Because we basically replicate family patterns from our family backgrounds.
Mhm.
In other words, when we get, look at the back up here. The truth is, most of us don't learn how to solve relationship problems when we're kids. We don't learn how to do that.
Yep.
So we launch into the 5 losing strategies that we talk about, being right, control, getting unbridled, retaliation, and shutdown and withdrawing. Those are the childlike ways that show up in our adult relationships that basically sabotage and undermine and ultimately destroy good relationships, because we basically act like children
Yeah.
when we're triggered. So when you say, what are the things to say it's time to quit? Well, the first question is, have you really done the work? Can you look at yourself in the mirror and say, I did my absolute best? And by that, I mean, you need to get outside assistance. This pattern that I'm talking about, this triggering dynamic, this dance, it's just about impossible to fix that on your own.
Yeah. And
Not
it's not
saying
going to
it's
go.
not, but it's really hard.
And it's not going to go away. You move to a next relationship, it's going to be the same thing coming again
You can't divorce yourself.
everywhere you go.
Where there you are, you take all your relationship deficits and skills
Mhm.
with you into the next relationship. And second, third marriages have a higher failure rate than first ones,
Yeah.
because they're often blended families, and that's a whole other level of challenge and complexity. Yeah.
Yeah. For sure.
I don't know if I answered your question directly. What are the markers? Fundamentally, what I say is this relationship really hurting you?
Hmm.
Like, are you really deeply hurting? Then it's time. Well, look at there's 3 gates that couples can go through when they have relationship problems. Gate 1, gate 2, and gate 3. Gate 1 is staying the course, which is basically the status quo.
Right.
A lot of people just hunker down, kids, finances, fear. Um, they just stay together, and it's staying the course. Second one is divorce and separations. That's gate 2. Gate 3 is a commitment to 6 months of intensive couples counseling. 6 months. Because it takes at least 10 couples counseling sessions to change that dynamic that I talked about.
Right.
At least 10. And usually closer to 20. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it didn't happen overnight.
It
So.
didn't happen overnight. So people have to realize that, because most people go to couples counseling, they have what I call 4 or 5 sessions.
Mhm.
And that's not enough to change it permanently. So
Yeah.
what ends up happening is what I call half-hearted couples counseling.
Yeah.
So for your listeners out there, if you really want to turn this around, you've got to find a really good, experienced couples counselor, because a lot of couples counseling is lame. It
Hmm.
just deals with that surface stuff.
Hmm.
So you got to find somebody that's emotionally focused couples counselor that gets into this underlying dynamic. And then most marriages can be turned around.
Yeah.
I mean, man, think about the implications of divorce,
Hmm.
kids, blended family issues,
Hmm.
your children, your grandchildren, your legacy.
Exactly. The ripples.
It's just unbelievably important, but people do not put it and make it important enough.
Yeah.
They just think I'm unhappy and I'm getting divorced. We're done.
Yeah.
But it
And the
doesn't
ripples,
have to be that way.
as you said as well, the ripples continue. Like people are watching no matter what. And if one couple does it, just like you see couples getting married and then their friends get married and their friends have kids, you can see the divorces and stuff
Yeah,
happen too, but because it becomes acceptable. This is the norm. So
yeah.
if I decide to get separated, people are watching me, and then if it's okay for me to do it, it becomes a permission for them too. So there's ripples
Well,
we're not even aware of.
yeah, see, the thing about this is people think that there's a myth that kids are better off if if their parents separate and they live in two happy households instead of one unhappy household. That's the thinking, one of the pervasive thoughts that people today have. You're better off to be divorced and separated. At least then the kids are not going to be in this conflict.
Right.
That's actually not true. The kids are not better off than that. They're worse than that. They're better off, even if you can stay reasonably respectful for each other. It doesn't have to be perfect. They're way better off in a two-parent family.
Right.
Way better off. Yeah, you don't have to be blissfully happily the perfect marriage, but this idea that I'm just going to be happy and my kids are going to be happy, that's a myth. It's not true.
Right.
Even if you think you're going to be happy, your kids are not going to be as well off if you split up rather than stay together. Yeah.
Right. Is there up to a certain age on that? Because this is probably shocking a few people because you do hear that a fair bit. Like, is there a like 13, 16, 18 moved out of the house?
Well, obviously, the older kids are, the more resilient they can be, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But it's likely that if their parents are getting divorced when they're teenagers, the conflict and the unhappy marriage has been going on for years,
Yeah.
right? So they've been living in an unhappy household.
Hmm.
But so I don't think there's any age specific that I know of study wise. But just imagine, you get separated, and now your kids are being parented by another man or another woman,
Hmm.
right? Who has probably kids of their own.
Yeah.
So now your kids are with a strange person parenting them, and now they've got all these other kids in tow. Can you imagine? You see all the divided loyalties and all the complexities
Hmm.
when you move into that whole realm.
Hmm.
It's a mess. It's a mess. It takes years for blended families to even begin to function like nuclear families.
Hmm.
Years, 7 years, it says. So people think they're getting out of this bad marriage and into that one. It's the old saying, your solution often becomes a bigger problem than the problem you had before. Yeah.
So it's almost like couples counseling should be mandatory for everybody, whether you have problems or not, as a proactive approach, like chiropractic. But most people probably won't do it though.
No, it's like people say premarital counseling. I say, yeah, people have to have some water under the bridge
Yeah.
before they really benefit from couples counseling. Because
Right.
usually when couples are first together, they're in love
Hmm.
and they don't really have significant problems, right?
Hmm.
It takes time for these underlying uh, dynamics to unfold, and that's what needs to be addressed for the
Hmm.
relationships to change. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember coming to one of your events at the center downtown, and Jen and I weren't married yet, so it was like 11 years ago, and we were moving that direction. And you were saying the same thing. So we're the only ones that were in that situation. So I think it's so important. But I look at a relationship as a place for myself to evolve too. Like it's a great mirror. It's a great training for myself to grow as a human being as well, without
Mm-hmm.
having a back door. So
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
I definitely recommend it to anybody looking to evolve as a man or a woman. Any any final thoughts for couples?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say, Eric, that you and your partner were there 11 years ago. You see, you're one of the people and the couples you see that are actively focusing on their relationship and actually nurturing it. See, couples that do that, they listen to podcasts, they go to workshops together, maybe they do some work together, couples work together. See, those are the couples that I think do best when you actually do those things, take action on it. I guess my which leads me to my final statement is, you don't have to suffer in your relationship. Get some help, but make sure you get the right kind of help, though. And I recommend that you find an emotionally focused therapist, one that's preferably certified as an emotionally focused therapist, EFT, and you can do that on the EFT website.
Okay.
And that way you'll know that person understands this dynamic, understands the deep pattern, and was going to work with you on that. So be careful who you invest your time on money in when it comes to couples counseling, because a lot of it isn't very effective. Yeah.
So are you taking new clients, and what is the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Well, yeah, I don't have a lot of availability these days, but if somebody's interested, they can contact me, and I can probably find out time to at least have an initial consultation with them and see if it's a good fit. And then I would be booking probably into February, March before we could actually start couples counseling formally. But yeah, it's been pretty busy, particularly since COVID. But that doesn't mean I can't take clients. Just email me or get a hold of me. Go to my website, sigtaylor.com. Yeah.
Right. That's a great site, sigtaylor.com. And there's the blogs on there have some great information too, and they go in depth on some of the things that we talked about today. So
Yeah.
good job on that site, by the way. It's great value. So thank you so much for your time. It's been great. You've definitely influenced me over the years that we've known each other, and hope to continue our relationship in the future.
Well, we certainly will, Eric. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been great talking to you.
Right. Have a fantastic day.
You too. Bye for now.